見ると死んじゃう呪いの動画です。
That's gotta be depressing as a teacher. Your students would rather die than continue learning.
If stairs that creak and distant shrieking keep you up at night, take a midnight drive and you'll survive by the projector light. You're desperate for a taste of horror, hungry for the hunt, and the late night double feature's got a seat for you in front. Stabbing, slashing, gnashing fangs abound, all wrapped up in a cheap mask made of rubber. Beasts that feast on terror by the pound, so think before you ask for extra butter. The day is done, the time has come to lay your body down. The late night double feature starting now.
It's just after midnight somewhere, so welcome to the Late Night Double Feature. I'm Clive Sinclair, and it's Sadako 3D night. True, we were supposed to have House on Haunted Hill night, but some schedule issues happened this year. We'll talk about it next time we meet. In the meantime, let's talk about Sadako 3D. Sadako 3D was made in 2012, around the same time as the big 3D movie craze in Hollywood. It was the first Japanese Ring movie in 12 years, the franchise having gone overseas to America during that time for a few movies we've talked about in an earlier episode. The movie's plot is very loosely based on the novel S, which I should note is a follow-up to other novels in the franchise like Rasen, wherein there was a virus that made clones of Sadako if you watched the tape while being a fertile woman, or Loop, where it turned out the whole thing had been in virtual reality. This is a strange franchise, but otherwise only connects to the original Ringu in that it features Sadako, a psychic girl who was thrown down a well because of her powers and that she placed a curse on a videotape. However, it's 2012 now, so VHS tapes are out, internet video is in. Tragedy, really. This is the story of Akane, a young teacher who we later learn has psychic powers. One of her students is killed by Sadako, and she begins investigating the cursed video that supposedly killed her. Meanwhile, detectives Koiso and Nakamura investigate a string of supposed suicides in their precinct, the latest having been a man who stepped in front of a bus while watching something on his laptop. Well, some people take VTuber drama very, very seriously. Nakamura thinks it's the cursed video that's going around the net. Said cursed video is actually rather insidious. If you seek it out, it appears as a broken link, but hours later it will reappear as a video featuring a man in white being strangled to death by Sadako, and in turn forcing you to either commit suicide, or Sadako comes out of the screen to murder you. Sometimes you just get tired of the old ways of killing people. You want to find whole new interesting ways of doing things to keep it fresh. Inexplicably, hey, watching this video will kill you is enough incentive for tons of people, mostly teenagers, to seek out the video and get killed. Strangely, despite all the people taking it seriously and verifying its origins, that it was a live broadcast of someone's suicide, that those at the streaming service who watched it died too, and people who viewed the original broadcast were also killed, nobody asks, hey, why would you want to seek out this video that will supposedly kill you? I'd say this was a sign of the stupidity of youth, but adults are doing it too, so no one is very smart. Despite the evidence connecting it, Koiso is still not convinced that the video is killing people. No, that's a different curse, where poison from the Final Fight games comes out of the TV to strangle you. The man committing suicide in the broadcast is Seiji Kashiwada, a high schooler but also a prolific artist. However, he was trolled and flamed heavily at a certain point, even accused of plagiarism by his own parents, and that led to the suicide broadcast. Koiso believes the video is fake because they can't find his body. Akane rescues one of her students when Sadako attacks her, using some kind of psychic scream that shatters the ghost in a 3D effect. Still, Sadako proclaims that Akane is the one, leading to a series of psychic visions for the woman where she keeps seeing Sadako coming out of screens that nobody else can see. Later, her boyfriend, Takanori, suddenly sees the cursed video come up on his monitor. Damn it, woman! It's a Mac! Nothing closes like normal! She uses her scream like before, and the two flee, only to have Sadako continue the attack on any monitor in the area, including a giant one on the side of a truck. Unfortunately, this does not result in a kaiju-sized Sadako rampaging around, but rather Takanori being kidnapped and pulled into her realm using her CGI hair. We still wait and hope for Godzilla versus the Ring. We learn that when Akane was a little girl, a deranged man came to her school to attack the kids with a box cutter. She was able to use her psychic scream to knock him out, and inexplicably, this made all the kids fear and mock her instead of all of those kids wanting to be her best friend. And even if not friends, you'd think they'd reconsider doing anything to upset her. Hey, it's that psychic girl who was able to stop a murderer just by screaming at him. I bet throwing an eraser at her head is a smart idea, and not something that will result in my organs being liquefied. Takanori had been the only one to actually befriend her, even stopping her from jumping off a roof. Akane reasons out that Seiji is trying to resurrect Sadako, or S as she's referred to by him, looking for some sort of vessel for her, and she thinks it might be herself. After Nakamura is killed by Sadako, in absolutely the silliest way imaginable, we'll get to that later, Koiso discovers Seiji's plan hidden on the walls of his apartment, to try to find the perfect vessel for Sadako's resurrection, even murdering tons of women in a failed attempt to recreate her, in hopes that a resurrected Sadako will destroy humanity. Get in, loser, we're fighting Sadako. Koiso takes Akane to Sadako's well and explains her backstory and Seiji's plan. Despite Sadako's well originally being in an area that turned into a resort, a decade or two later, it's suddenly on an abandoned industrial site. Inexplicably, all of the women Seiji killed come crawling out of the well as monstrous, imperfect Sadako clones. One bites Koiso, taking him out of the movie, while the others chase after Akane. Still, they're pretty fragile things, as just hitting one with a rock makes it devolve into bugs. Same for stabbing them, or, as is Akane's signature move, the psychic scream. I would just like to remind you all that this is the same franchise as the haunted videotape. She suddenly finds a cell phone just sitting in the same kind of chair Seiji died in, and Sadako reaches out of the phone to pull her into the video dimension or whatever. Sadako even took the opportunity to cut her bangs for this conversation, letting Takanori go and telling Akane that they're the same, which she vehemently denies because of what they use their powers for. Sadako, unmoved by this, tries to take over Akane's body, but Takanori smashes the phone they were in, and this somehow saves her from Sadako, though not from her hair, which now has its own zip code considering how big it is. Also, there's a mid-credit scene where Seiji's landlady appears, repeating a line she had said earlier. Isn't everything fake? As if that was some kind of thematic touchpoint in the film, and not just something incredibly stupid and wrong that she had said. This is a bad movie. But it's a fun bad movie. It is fascinating to study. An attempted reinvention of the franchise for the internet age. A bit of a teen slasher because of all the emphasis on young people believing in the curse while Koiso does not. Even having cyberbullying as a plot point. A gimmicky 3D cash-in. And it's suddenly a monster movie at one point. As a result, its tone is radically different from the rest of the franchise, feeling in some ways more like a lesser Nightmare on Elm Street movie than a Ring movie. Let's talk about what works and what doesn't. And what really doesn't work is the horror. The movie is not without its share of scary imagery and ideas. The opening sequence, where the lid on the well is opened, what appears to be Sadako's body is dumped in, only to reveal an entire pile of bodies of women similar to Sadako, is weird and disturbing. Although the 3D effect when shown without the 3D present makes it look more like he's dropping a cardboard cutout into the well, which is just polluting on top of murder. The imperfect Sadako clones are delightfully monstrous, especially the first time we see them emerge from the well. But why do they all have the same design of a stretchy-limbed monster girl with sharp teeth and claws? Maybe it's a budget thing, but wouldn't it have been better to feature slightly different designs for all of them? Like, some are more humanoid, and others barely have any human features. How does he keep screwing up making new Sadakos in exactly the same way each time? They seem to be super fast, but keep having difficulty catching up to Akane, eventually needing to use their hair to grab her. It's a very jump scare happy movie, usually in the vein of a loud music sting just from something unexpected that ruins any atmosphere the movie has. But occasionally there are actual scares from Sadako climbing out of the screen, as is her motif, though she never fully emerges. As I said, we get some new fun visuals, like the giant-sized one, or multiple Sadakos coming out of screens clutching for her victims. The problem is that this is really not the kind of terror that Ring movies are supposed to evoke. The Ring is supposed to be quieter, slow burn, building up the tension and dread. This goes for cheap thrills and basic loud music sting kind of frights. The new Cursed video is bad. There's no other way around it. Be it the American or Japanese version, Sadako's original tape was full of weird, disturbing images, and the new video is some pretentious jerk getting strangled by Sadako. A bunch of windows come up showing the same thing, and it's all shaky and close-up of his eyes, and then nothing. It is not scary. Unless you find pop-up ads scary, and I don't. I find them annoying. Much like this Cursed video. The kills are mostly unimpressive, with possibly the worst being Nakamura, who exclaims that he watched the Cursed video, and for whatever reason, he has a big long Sadako wig on his head, and then shoots himself. Forcing him to kill himself is one thing, but why the wig? Is Sadako infecting him from his scalp? This movie does not understand why Sadako is scary and thinks that showing Sadako's face and giving her glowy red eyes is spooky and not just kind of lame. The downturned eye of Sadako is one of the most enduringly terrifying visuals of the franchise, and it's not present here. Seeing her like this removes her monstrous quality and mystique. She looks like any person. Hiding her face implies that she is not recognizably human anymore. While the American films' Samara looks like just a grumpy girl, they at least make her face appear to be a little more inhuman. Sadako here is just some random woman who spouts off that she and Akane are the same. What's more, despite the movie being called Sadako 3D, removing the Ring franchise name from here on out in Japan, Sadako almost feels like an afterthought. The plot involves her, certainly. The point of Seiji's plan is to resurrect her, but by making Seiji the focus of the Cursed video, by having so much of the story be centered around Seiji's plan that he somehow negotiated with Sadako, by not even speaking Sadako's name until an hour in, Sadako doesn't feel like she's a major part of her own movie. And yet our protagonist is designed as an anti-Sadako. Like Sadako, Akane's psychic powers ostracized her, but instead of wanting revenge for that, she's decided to suppress them and use them for good. She saves people with them, does not lose the love of her life like Sadako did in Ringu Zero, and even gets to return that favor when she saves one of her students from leaping off the roof from the Cursed video, just like Takanori had done for her. She's afraid of her power, but knows that she has to embrace it to defeat Sadako. In theory, anyway. In practice, her boyfriend smashes a cell phone and everything is magically solved. The 3D is distracting in much the same way the 3D in Friday the 13th Part 3 is distracting, if you're not watching it with 3D at all. Shots are framed to have stuff come right at the camera. The kills and scares are gimmicky and based on the idea that you are watching it in 3D. And consequently, that actually makes the 3D rather charming and endearing. Many movies of the time were just 3D conversions or made by people who didn't want to do too much with the gimmick. Sadako 3D has no illusions that it is anything but a gimmick film, so the effect is used as frequently as possible, even if it makes little sense. For instance, an early shot of the film features Sadako's hand reaching out of a computer monitor and just staying there for several seconds. Because 3D! It's not moving or trying to grasp anything, it is solely there for the effect. Almost like they left a shot made only for the trailer in the movie itself. Also, the psychic scream-shattering CGI glass has the new problem of that CGI glass just disappearing for no reason. And unfortunately, the shots of Sadako emerging from screens feel a lot cheaper in this than in the original movies, because of course the 3D effects around her are much more noticeable, especially when she's just in a blank background. CGI butterflies keep appearing around the film, knocking into a window. A random one is in the basement where Seiji did the broadcast, as well as covering the walls for some reason. One wakes up Takanori so he can free Akane by smashing the cell phone, but what they are is never explained and their presence never brought up. Maybe the point is some sort of symbolism of Akane needing to be reborn or transformed, and the hair around her at the end is a cocoon. I'm reaching here because if that's the case, it is not implemented well at all. Wikipedia is convinced that, because this movie is based on S and that the character of Takanori Ando is in this, that it is a sequel to Rasen. It is not in the slightest. They both have a character named Takanori Ando, but Takanori's connection to Mitsuo Ando of Rasen is not stated. None of the events of Rasen are brought up, and the plot of the book is not the same as the plot of the movie. It's like saying that the John Smith from Pocahontas is the same as the John Smith from the A-Team. Hell, Book Seiji couldn't be farther from Movie Seiji. Movie Seiji is an edgy teen who wants to destroy the world using Sadako because people made fun of him on the internet. Book Seiji is a reborn Ryuji from the original story trying to stop Sadako, and then returns to virtual reality, because that was a thing in the books. Sadako 3D is a schlocky PG-13 monster movie meant to be an entertaining ride for teenagers on dates, but otherwise not entertaining for anything other than so bad it's good fare. But let's see if they change that around for the sequel. Sometime after the events of the first movie, Akane and Takanori had a child together, Nagi. Unfortunately, Akane died in childbirth, probably from the fatal condition baby vomiting CGI hair jump scare. Truly one of the most terrible illnesses to affect new mothers. 5 years later, Takanori is a depressed wreck, mostly acting as a security guard at a hospital, and is emotionally distant from his daughter. Our main character is instead his sister, Fuko, who handles raising Nagi. We also get an opening kill where we see this film's ring video, which is less of a video and more the graphical display of a web page corrupting until she is driven to kill herself. Believe it or not, this will be important later. Nagi is having problems. Kids making fun of her for being so quiet and isolated all the time, being emotionally distant from people all around her, and people seem to die around her, like a random guy on a phone she just goes up to and grabs. To be fair to her, that guy was actually an NFT grifter. Fuko asks her psychology teacher about the disturbing drawings Nagi is making, but she writes it off as her having an overactive imagination, and Fuko projecting her own feelings about her mother's suicide onto her, blaming herself for it. That is a leap worthy of an imperfect Sadako clone, lady. I mean, you're right, but it's still a leap from Nagi wants her mother and is emotionally withdrawn to maybe you're actually just feeling guilty about your own mom's suicide. But what is a bigger leap, something that I cannot fathom why it was done or how, is a plot point revealed during a news report. Somehow, without any explanation, without any logical reason offered, despite the entire thing of Sadako 3D's ring video being this guy's suicide, Sadako killing him, enabling this entire sequence of events to happen, Seiji is alive! And I don't mean he's some mysterious presence who comes in or is scarred or undead or something. No, he has been tried and convicted for the numerous murders he committed in the first movie. The best we've got is Koiso saying that there was no body in the first movie, but I just kind of assumed he was vaporized from psychic ghost magic, or he became part of his own cursed video. Not that Sadako spared him or whatever, they just never mentioned that he's supposed to be dead. After having nightmares about Nagi and her own dead mother, plus the housekeeper getting thrown out a window while yelling Nagi repeatedly, Fuko begins to suspect that something might be weird about her niece. Meanwhile, with so many strange suicides happening, Detective Kakeuchi begins investigating, even reaching out to Koiso from the first movie because of the similarities to what happened in it. Koiso is now using a wheelchair and a voice box after the imperfect Sadako clone ripped out his throat. He tells her about Sadako, though not how she connects to the case, only otherwise saying that Akane was involved in the original case. And then Koiso is shoved down a flight of stairs by someone. Thanks for coming back for that one scene that could have just been Kakeuchi reading a police report. That accomplished a lot. Nagi seemingly kills or injures an entire subway train full of people, some even sprouting CGI hair and attacking others in a similar manner as Nakamura did in the first movie. Believe it or not, it actually looks slightly better here because of the CGI and the shaky camera. Fuko confronts Takanori over the connection between Nagi and the disasters, but he refuses to answer any questions. Spotting Nagi in the security camera footage of the train disaster, Kakeuchi also suspects Nagi's connection to all this. Investigating on her own, Fuko discovers a bunch of letters that Takanori kept. Message after message asking how Nagi was doing. Me personally, if I was receiving strange letters constantly asking about my daughter, I'd either destroy them or hand them over to the cops, start building evidence of stalking and harassment, Not just shove them in a closet, but maybe I'm the weirdo. The letters were sent by Seiji, so Fuko goes to see him in prison, where he apparently is still allowed to wear his regular clothes instead of a jumpsuit. Seiji says that he's Nagi's fan and somehow knows all about Fuko and her mother's suicide, despite him having no reason to do so. And all Fuko can do is sit and repeatedly ask what the hell he's talking about, because she doesn't know anything about the events of the first movie, or Sadako in general, or what's going on with Nagi. He does finally get around to explaining that Nagi isn't Akane's daughter, but Sadako's. And again, she has no idea who Sadako is, especially when the only explanation Seiji offers is that she's despair, and that 5 years ago she sowed the seeds of despair with the cursed video. If it wasn't evident from this description already, Sadako 3D2 is a completely different beast from its predecessor. It's slower, moodier, the 3D gimmickry more restrained. It is not schlocky, and is attempting to push the series back into serious horror again. Which is kind of odd, because while it has a different screenplay writer, it is still directed by the same guy as the first, Tsutomu Hanabusa. Seiji says that the only way to stop the horrors to come would be to kill Sadako's child, even though she got this advice from a weirdo serial killer who knows more than he should and claimed to be a fan of Nagi. Also, Fuko's teacher gets possessed by the evil Sadako wig virus until her hair gets caught in a paper shredder and she's swinging it around. Okay, so clearly the movie hasn't completely abandoned its schlockier roots. Finally seeing the cursed video herself, Fuko is drawn into a vision of her mother's suicide and pulled into a bloody ocean where, whale songs play.
Admiral, there be whales here!
After some more jump scare nightmares, Fuko is convinced that she needs to kill Nagi, preparing to throw her off a bridge. But Nagi finally asks sincerely, crying, well, you don't answer people's questions, you stare evilly at them, you cryptically say that people are going to die, and indeed, lots of people get killed around you. So, yeah, that's a few reasons, but we can work on that. Fuko stops herself, realizing that Nagi isn't the one killing people. Nagi has Akane's psychic powers, but in the form of visions. She can see people's deaths. That's why she acts so weird around them and draws the pictures. Probably would have helped if you had mentioned that before, kid, or, made any kind of reaction to it happening. Fuko explains all this to Takanori and wants to know if she's Sadako's child. But Takanori hits back with the first twist of the movie. Akane is alive. In a disused bunker at the hospital, Takanori is keeping the comatose Akane and disposing of the massive amount of hair growing from her. It seems that smashing the cell phone isn't what stopped Sadako. Rather, Akane trapped Sadako within her body. However, when she became pregnant, Nagi became a potential way for Sadako to escape. Akane is holding her at bay within her body, but if she and her daughter were to ever reunite, Sadako would be able to escape. Somehow. In any event, they don't know who it is who's actually killing all those people. And the answer we get at the end is nonsensical. Nagi goes to the hospital Takanori works at, and is attacked by Kakiyuchi. He explains that the opening kill was, in fact, his wife. He blames Nagi and Akane for this, and became cursed off-screen too, and is now devoted to killing them. Fortunately, 2 wig-infected people attack him, Fuko taking Nagi down to her mother when she starts crying, desperate to see her. So, the whole Sadako will be reborn thing just went in one ear and out the other, huh? However, before the two can be properly reunited, Kakiyuchi comes in and shoots Akane dead. Nagi's reaction is more restrained than you'd think. Either her or her psychic powers cause Kakiyuchi to shoot himself, and somehow she summons Sadako's well, creating the amazing visual of the blood pouring from it. Sadako takes Nagi with her back into the well, Fuko going after her and managing to pull her away from Sadako. Nagi becomes well adjusted, Fuko continues to raise her, and Seiji gets executed. And it's revealed that the real killer was, in fact, Sadako's daughter. You remember, right? This girl who hasn't shown up until now? That's Sadako's daughter. It's a big reveal. It also makes absolutely no sense. I thought maybe that ending montage was supposed to imply that she'd been in the background this entire time, but I couldn't find her during any of the kills. Hell, one part of the montage seems to imply that there are multiples of her. When and where did Sadako have a child? And if Seiji knows that Sadako's child is out there murdering people, why assume it was Nagi? And why would he tell Fuko to kill Nagi if Nagi reuniting with Akane would free Sadako? Which is what he wanted in the first place. Did Seiji's landlady have something to do with this? What is her deal anyway? She has those 2 moments in Sadako 3D, then shows up a few times in the sequel to continue to do nothing but be a devoted follower of Seiji despite never explaining anything about herself or her beliefs or why she likes Seiji beyond, isn't everything fake? If you weren't gonna do anything with her character, why did you keep having her show up? Was this supposed to be setting up a 3rd movie? Why was Takanori so distant from Nagi if he actually loved her and didn't want anything bad to happen to her and didn't blame her for Akane's death? In any case, Sadako 3D2 is actually pretty damn good. With some caveats. The first being that it is a sequel to Sadako 3D. For this to make any sense, or at least for you to care about what's happening, you need to have seen the first movie. And the first movie is garbage. Unlike the gimmicky 3D shots of the first movie, the 3D is barely used in this, or at least the noticeable kind. The jump scares certainly are, with lots of instances of things going right at the center of the camera, but otherwise, it doesn't feel like it's shot with the gimmick as the primary focus. Speaking of, it is again very jump scare happy. It does feel like it's earning them more, though. The movie is a bit of a slow burn, occasionally interrupted by jump scares. Might be too slow for most people on a first watch. On a second watch, it felt like things were moving at a better pace, but if you want major plot advancements that contribute to the more dour atmosphere, you might have to wait a bit. I also questioned the decision to kill Akane. While it did the job of bringing us to our climax and the excellent visual of the blood overflowing the well, it also feels like Akane got a really raw deal, sacrificing her life and happiness to restrain Sadako, only for it to be pointless, both because of her eventual return, and because it turns out her daughter's still out there killing people. There's no real rhyme or reason to who gets killed, either. It's no longer the videotape getting spread around, or even people seeking out the cursed video online. It's just random people being killed by Sadako's daughter, and Nagi just happens to be nearby, probably because of her visions. Still, regardless of the loss of Akane, Fuko has an overall great arc, getting to move past her misplaced guilt of her mother's death by saving Nagi, not from suicide, but the pull of the water, which had happened to her mother's body when she killed herself. Nagi herself is very well acted, managing to pull off the creepy glances before she reveals her humanity and how much she doesn't want people to be afraid of her, just wanting to see her mom. Neat touch for the Sadako's daughter misdirect, though, having her hair styled in the same way as Sadako in the first film. Unfortunately, that brings me to my big criticism of the film, and that's the lack of Sadako. By virtue of her character getting restrained by Akane, Sadako doesn't actually appear until the very end, and doesn't really do anything, in a movie called Sadako 3D2. All of the weird wig deaths and even the cursed video this time is actually Sadako's daughter, which is not whose name is on the film. The movie itself feels more like a subgenre shift, from the ghostly horror of Sadako to an evil child in the vein of The Omen or The Good Son. Most of the movie we are led to believe that Nagi is this force of evil and we should fear her. It's her movie, not Sadako's. Admittedly, it's still Sadako's franchise, which is why it's called that, but it feels like there should have been more hinting to her fate. Maybe she's reaching out to kill people, but we keep seeing her get restrained or the like. It doesn't make the movie bad, this is still a good Ring movie, it's just you kind of expect more Sadako for that. And with that, let's wrap things up here with Clive Sinclair's Healthier Living Through Horror, where the movies teach us how to lead more prosperous lives. For Sadako 3D, if you're going to seek out cursed videos that will kill you, make sure you have a hammer handy to smash your cell phone. Best to use a burner phone for this too. While the bite of an imperfect Sadako clone may cause paralysis and loss of throat, a good hard slap should be enough to put them down. And for Sadako 3D 2, when collecting excess hair from your comatose wife who's possessed by an evil ghost girl, don't burn it. Donate it! It's perfectly good hair, and wig makers will appreciate it. Speaking of, if you're a wig maker, try not to make your wigs Sadako-sized. While the temptation is there for ultimate braiding, it's too much of a danger when around fires or paper shredders. We won't be spinning the wheel, because when we come back in January, assuming we do, it's finally time for House on Haunted Hill Night. Until then, I'm Clive Sinclair, and it's just after midnight somewhere.